So I'm here at the diocesan offices of the Diocese of Knoxville with the Chancellor of the Realm, as I like to call him, Deacon Sean Smith. We're here celebrating the end of the Cannonball Catholic Blog Awards, of which this blog was nominated for in two categories, both in the category of Best Underappreciated Blog as well as Best Spiritual Treat. When I last checked the polling, it seemed that we had lost in the category of Best Underappreciated, which in fact may mean that we won, because we are more underappreciated than those over at Barefoot and Pregnant, to which, in the words of John Hartford, I will just say, I hurl myself at your cosmic excellence. But it does seem that we did win in the category of Spiritual Treat. You may be thinking, well, that's great, Father Christian, but why are you at the diocesan offices with Deacon Sean? And I thought an appropriate celebration for the end of these awards would be, because they're the Cannonball Awards, would be to speak with a canon lawyer. He deals with different kinds of cannons than the ones that shoot cannonballs. And maybe just to speak with him a little bit about first Canon Law, but then maybe some of the most underappreciated canons, maybe some of the most spiritual canons, seemed very appropriate in light of the Crescat's Blog Awards. So maybe we just start by asking Deacon Sean where the word canon itself comes from. I know we hear that the canon of scriptures also sometimes.
Well, you know, I think the first time the word canon was used was in, at least in the ecclesial world, was probably in 450 BC. And it's often used to basically mean the word reed or measuring tool or measuring stick. And so in the realm of canon law, it's basically the list of rules that make up our church. Of course, there's the canon of Scripture, which is basically the list of books, canonical books that made up both the Old and the New Testament. And so there's various meaning, but the root of the word comes from reed or measuring stick.
So it's what we measure things by.
Correct.
Maybe that's what Crescat was thinking when she thought of the Cannonball Awards, you know, that it was a way to measure mediocre blogs to see which one is the best of, you know.
Could be.
I'm not sure.
I can't speak for her.
Or maybe she just thought we should be shot out of a cannon.
It could be, especially those who win.
Perhaps. Well, I called you up and I said, well, maybe you would like the opportunity, because we are talking about things that are underappreciated, to talk about one or two of the most underappreciated canons in this big code of canon law that you got here.
You know, there are several canons that I think are not only underappreciated. There's lots of canons that not only the faithful has no clue about. I think even our men of sacred orders have no idea that they exist and have a great relationship to them. I think there is a series of canons, it's canons 732 through 739, that are absolutely, I believe, some of the most underappreciated. What they have to do is with something called hierarchical recourse. So let's just say, for example, you're a faithful pastor and you have an employee, and the employee does X, Y, or Z, and you do an administrative decree. You make a decision and you decree this decision, and that person feels that it's unfair. These canons of hierarchical recourse give that person recourse to your supervisor, which in your case would be the bishop. Same thing applies. Let's say the bishop does something to you, administrative action that he decrees, and you feel it's unfair and unjust and it's hurtful to you or injurious in some way, then you have hierarchical recourse to the bishop's superior. Now, first of all, a lot of people don't know that there's canons to give the lay people, ecclesiastical ministers, clerics, and even bishops this recourse, but indeed it's there. And I think a lot of times when you have decisions that are made in a vacuum, or from everything from terminations to whatever whatever it is, suspensions, etc. That's a canon that can be, and it's a good one because it's part of your right.
So it's not always about canon law being the dark side of the good news.
Exactly. You know, there's a whole series of the front end of the 200 series, which, you know, a lot of times some people call it the Bill of Rights, but we as the faithful, we as clerics, we all have responsibilities and we all have obligations, but we also have lots of rights, and we may not know what all those rights are. But if any of those rights are damaged, this canonical recourse, these canons are terrific, and I think if people were made aware of them and exercise them, we have a lot more happy people.
Would you say, and I don't know if this is true or not, maybe you don't know about this situation, but it's been big among bloggers right now. Father Frank Pavone, was called back by his bishop to his diocese from outside ministry he was doing, and he's kind of appealing that to one of the congregations in Rome. That's probably what he's doing.
That's exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you think, well, gee, you can't bypass the bishop. The buck stops with the bishop. Well, that's not true. That's what Canon 1732 through 39 are all about. Is no matter how high you are, whether you're a parochial vicar, associate pastor, a pastor, a deacon, whatever, you have recourse to whoever decreed that administrative action, their superior. And that's what he's exercising. And he has that very right to do that, and should, if he's feeling injured in any way.
And we'll see what the
See
decision
what happens.
comes back.
Yeah.
So the other category we were talking about maybe is, and this may sound weird to some people, but there are spiritual aspects to the code of canon law. It is church law, after all. What do you think is the most spiritual of the canons?
Boy, there's lots of those too. And canon law gets a bad rap because they say, oh, it's a bunch of legalese and legaloos, but the entire law is based on theology. So there should be a spiritual component basis for all of them. I would say I have two favorites. And I think one is quoted by many canonists, and that's the very last canon. And what the very last canon says is the supreme law of the church. Over all the laws, the supreme law of the church is the salvation of souls. And so, in this big fat book, there's 1,752 canons. And canon 1,752 says that the supreme law of the church is salvation of souls. But if you dive deep, for me personally, a canon that is very spiritual in nature and what fruits come from it, and we can relate it back to one of those underappreciated canons, is there's a canon 942 which basically says that if we're going to reserve the most holy sacrament, the most holy Eucharist, in a tabernacle, say at a church or a chapel or an oratory, then at least once in a while there is to be an extended adoration, not just this little short, where we do exposition and benediction and we put Jesus back in the tabernacle. There is to be an extended to give the faithful this time. Doesn't mean we have to do perpetual adoration, but unfortunately, we do have places where the most holy sacrament is reserved, and they never expose it for the faithful to adore. So, there's canons that deal with all those kind of things that have a spiritual realm. And I think the other thing is, you can't get any more spiritual than viaticum. And there's canons that deal with viaticum, and I think one in particular that deals with, even if I receive the Eucharist from you this morning, and then I have an accident 2 hours later, and I'm on my deathbed, you come and anoint me, you are, per the canon, to give me viaticum, to give me the Eucharist again. Because viaticum, per the canon, is supposed to be the very, very last sacrament you receive, and it's your food for your journey home to God. And there's canons that deal with that.
There's tons. Now, I think I've asked you this before, but are there any canons in canon law that would govern, say, the ownership of cannons or the use of cannons, that you shoot?
There isn't in the 1983 code. However, in the 1426 code, and I'm just kidding, I have no idea.
Well, I mean, it's probably something that people who are interested in the Cannonball Awards would like to know.
Yeah.
Are there any cannons on cannons? But
Yeah.
I don't think there are.
Yeah,
I think maybe guns, but maybe not cannons themselves.
probably not cannons themselves, but I dare say that if a priest such as yourself would use a cannon and a cannonball to cause harm, that would be considered a delict, and we would have to go through the penalty phase, and there's all sorts of
Things
cannons
about
that deal
penalties.
with that.
That is correct. Well, we'll try to stay away from shooting cannons at people. Well, one last thing I'll share with people that you may or may not know. Some of you I know the blog by the Ironic Catholic, who was also up for an award. I'm not sure whether she won or not, but Deacon Sean gets much of his wisdom not directly from her, but from the school where she teaches. Is where he learned Canon Law, and so he has that connection too. I don't think that you've met her yet, but maybe
I've
one of
not
these
met
days.
her, but great school that she works at.
Yeah.
Beautiful place.
Well, I think that's all the time we have, but for all those who participated in this year's awards, we hope that this is a worthy tribute to both those who won and maybe those who didn't win but were in the running. So thanks.